We're going to talk to you a little bit this morning about knowing what you're seeing. You know, we all grown up different, and we've all had different standards of life, and those things affect the way that we see things sometimes. And that's the way it's always been. But we need to understand that either we've got a biblical view of things, or the devil will paint us a good picture of what we're seeing and make us believe we're seeing one thing when there's an entirely different motive behind what these eyes are seeing. You know, it's kind of like a rich widow that a shyster's proposing to. He's talking marriage, and she's seeing love and, you know, fellowship, and he's seeing money. It's a proposal. It's a marriage proposal. But both sides begin to see things different. They look at it for what they're feeling and what they're wanting. And the devil really pulls those kind of things on us to keep us from seeking out God. Keep us from seeing what God's doing. Right. You know, he'll have us looking at how bad things are and getting our eyes off the promise of what God said He would be doing in our lives. And you know, you can cheat yourself out of a blessing by getting on the negative side with him, with the devil. But it's always been that way. But in these last days, we must understand what it is we're looking at. What it is we're actually seeing. Now, it's always been that way. The devil has always used our natural vision to show us what he's wanting us to see. You know, when Israel came out of Egypt, they'd been down in Egypt slaves for some 430 years. And God had told them He was going to bring them into a land of promise and give them an inheritance in this land of Canaan. And so they were about to enter into the land, and Moses, you can find this over in Numbers 13, but Moses sent out some spies to spy out the land where they were going. And when they got back, now they had all saw the same things. But when they got back, all but two said, we can't take that land because there's giants over there. So it's a good land, but there's no way we can conquer that land because, hey, we're grasshoppers in their eyes. They're so much bigger than we are. But two said, we're more than able. Let's go up and take it. Looking at the same thing, folks. Seeing the exact same thing. But 10 saw it in the natural and 2 saw it for what God said He would do. And you know, we go along, we find the old prophet Elijah. There'd been a drought in Israel. And it was a drought. It was like 3 years and a half. It had been a drought for a while. But it was time for the drought to end, and Elijah went up on the mountain and began to pray to the Lord for rain, and he was praying, and he couldn't see anything happening. So he started sending his servant out on the edge of the mountain to look out across, you know, the horizon, and he asked him, said, what do you see? And he kept going back, he didn't see anything. But after a while, he said, I see a cloud, but it's not but about the size of a man's hand. Elijah said, you go tell the king to get off the mountain or the rain's going to stop him. The servant saw a cloud the size of a man's hand. Elijah saw a rainstorm coming. Looking at the same thing, folks. One, looking at the natural, Elijah expected his prayer to be answered. He said, get the king off the mountain before the rain stops him. And you go on down and you find it again with Elisha, the replacement for Elijah when Elijah was taken. Israel had been at war with Syria, And every time Syria would set up an ambush for the king wouldn't show up. And so he began to inquire. He said, we got a spy among us. One of his servants said, we don't have a spy. They got a prophet over in Israel that's telling the king your thoughts. He's telling him what you're going to do before you get there. And so they sent out an army to capture Elisha. See how stupid the devil will make you? He knew that Elisha was telling the king what he was thinking, but he thought he was going to pull one on Elisha. So he sent the army out there to capture Elisha. And his servant woke up, they were sleeping. The servant woke up and began to look. And he woke up Elisha in a panic. He said, we're completely surrounded. And I'm ad-libbing, but go back and read the story. He said, we're surrounded. What are we going to do? Elisha said, well, there's more for us than there are for them. We got them outnumbered. Ain't but two folks up there, folks. Just him and Elisha. But Elisha could see the protection of God. And the servant could only see the numbers of men. Didn't see what he was looking at. See, and when we understand what the Bible has said, when these things begin to happen in the world, we understand what's behind it. We understand what we're looking at. But the devil wants you to continue to listen to CNN, continue negative news, and believe all is lost. No, all ain't lost. The world is getting in a bad shape and it's going to continue. But you're not of the world if you know Jesus. But don't get your eyes to where they're seeing what the devil wants you to see. And like I said, it's always been this way. So we have to be aware of it. Now Jesus over in Matthew 13, he was teaching the people. We'll start about the 13th verse of Matthew 13. And he'd been teaching them in parables, and the disciples came to him and said, why are you teaching them in parables? And he said this. He said, I speak unto them in parables because they seeing, see not, and hearing, they hear not, neither do they understand. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which says, by hearing you shall hear and shall not understand, and seeing you shall see and shall not perceive. In other words, you'll be looking at it and not know what you're seeing. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and shall be converted, and I shall heal them. He said they're tired of hearing. They're not going to hear what I'm telling them, and they're not going to see what I'm trying to show them. Because folks, he said they're dull of hearing. They had been hearing one thing all of their lives. Now, here comes Jesus. The Jewish people had been looking for a Messiah from the beginning of the Jewish nation. Back in Genesis, Moses began to tell them that God was going to raise up a prophet like him and to show them the way. And all through the prophets, they spoke of the coming of Christ to ransom Israel. They were looking for him. But they had in their mind made up what he was going to be and who he was going to be. And when Jesus got there, they missed him. Because they were seeing with the natural eye, not with what God had said. They could not see the things that Jesus was saying because they had decided he wasn't the one they were looking for. Because in their mind, they had begun to look for a Messiah that was going to come and overthrow the Roman government and make them free again. And here comes Jesus. He's not fighting anybody. He's just telling them how much God loves them. He's telling them what they need to do to be pleasing to God so God can deliver them. He's telling them that he's come to die for their sins. They didn't want to hear any of this. So they were looking right at the Savior, looking right at the deliverer, and not hearing anything and not seeing anything. You know, they came to him one time. Jesus had fed the multitudes with bread. He had healed blinded eyes. He had raised the dead. He had healed the sick. And they came to him and said, show us a sign. Show us something. All of this they had saw and none of it registered. Because he wasn't, in their mind, the Messiah that they were looking for. They was marching, like a lot of folks today, to whatever beat the drum was playing at the moment. You know, you see folks today, folks, whatever fad comes along, that's it. Whatever comes along, they're in on that. They don't think for themselves. They're just waiting for somebody to come along with a good word that excites them at the moment. They run on emotions and not on truth. Now, Jesus speaking to the Pharisees over in John 9 and 39 and 41 says this. He said, for judgment I am come unto this world, that they which see they which see not might see, and they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him said, are we blind also? And Jesus said unto them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains. He said they had made up their mind that they had the truth. He said, I've come for judgment. For those that didn't know, I'm going to give them a chance to know. Those that had understands that they don't have it all, I'm going to open their eyes so they can see. And you, the Pharisees, which have decided, I've already got it. He said, you're going to be blinded so that you won't see. And you know, we were talking the other day about how many people have lost sight of the salvation of Christ and has confidence in a church. You say, do you know Jesus? And they'll say, I'm Baptist. I'm Methodist. I'm Church of God. So they've already decided that what they've got is all they need. And so Christ cannot give them any more revelation. And wherever, you've heard me say this a bunch of times, folks, and it's never been more truer than it is right now. Wherever you decide to stop with the Lord is where you're going to be. If He's trying to show you something in the Word, and He shows you a truth, and you decide you don't like that truth, your revelation is ended until you move forward with what He's trying to give you today. Is that all right? You have to know what you're seeing. Jesus said that I came so that them that never knew the things of God could be made aware of them. And those that knew but rejected will continue in their blindness. And folks, we've come full circle. We really have. We have come full circle. We've got, not only have we got great institutions of natural learning, but we've got great institutions of religious learning. You can, and there's some good schools out there, don't get me wrong. And there's some good colleges out there. But they're few and far between. And most religious schools are going to teach you exactly what they're teaching in the pulpits and the churches. They're not going to say, seek God. Follow after the Spirit. Get in the Word and learn the truth for yourself. They teach you what they want you to hear in most cases. Some don't, but a lot does. That's the reason that a lot of kids will go in there with no knowledge and come out with no real knowledge either. They're just following blindly after what they're told. But we've come full circle. And so many of the churches is as blind today as the natural world is blind. In the pulpit, we have homosexuals practicing homosexuals in the pulpit. We preach it. Now, if I'm not going to follow after the Word, how can I tell you how to follow after the Word? And am I down on homosexuals? No. Sure ain't. I'm down on the sin that kills man. Amen. I'm down on the sin that will kill you. And what God has said is truth will be truth when Jesus gets here, folks. But to bring in the world, the church, so many of the churches have just embraced whatever the world wants to embrace. We told you the other day about the leader of one of the greatest, the largest churches in the world has said the Big Bang Theory is right. Rejected what God said for what man said. And see, everybody who gets away from this word thinks that they've done so because they're smarter than this word. This word's been around a long time. How long have you been here? And we think we know more than what this knows. But most of the time, folks, again, people who think that they've got better knowledge than what this word never read it for themselves. Never saw it for themselves. They think they see what's happening. But this is what's happening. It's what he says. What God has already declared. Now, Jesus, over in Luke 12, he kind of begins to chide the people because they had a lot of natural knowledge and couldn't see who he was. And he said this. He said, when you see a cloud rise out of the west, straightway you say, there comes a shower, and so it is. And when you see the south wind blow, you say, there will be heat, and it comes to pass. You hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky and the earth. How is it that you cannot discern this time? He said, you got it all figured out through what the natural customs, through the natural laws. But he called them hypocrites because they were the religious leaders and they could not see who he was. He said, you know when it's going to rain because you look at the natural things, and you know when the heat's coming because you look at the natural laws, but you have missed what God has told you. And he called them hypocrites. They were completely lost for the things for the time that they had entered into. They were completely lost, looking at the Messiah they had prayed for and not recognizing him, but still they could recognize the things of the world. Do you understand that all that we call it education, and education is good to a point, but everything that you learned in school was just what some man had learned down through the ages and decided to give it to you. And you know what he learned it from? He learned it from his natural surroundings. See, the spiritual things of God, I can tell you what the Bible says, but if you're going to get an understanding, you've got to go to the author. I can't give you a spiritual understanding. I can just tell you what the Word says, and you can sit here under this Word from now on and still not get it. Because you are a spiritual being. If you want to know God's spiritual truth, you have to go and understand His Word and what He's saying to you. And no man can give you that. Now let's move on into our time. Let's kind of turn on the news. Now the day, since Israel became a nation back in 1948, this country, America, has supported her. And by the way, Israel became a nation exactly the way God said she would. Thousands of years before she became a nation again, God said she would, and He said exactly how He was going to do it. He said she'd be born at once. And she was. The United Nations recognized her as a state. One day she became a nation. And this country was the first one to recognize her, and we backed her all these years when all around her was her enemies trying to destroy her. But have you been reading the news? You've been watching the news lately? See, just last week, of course it's been going on now for a time, but just last week, it's supposed to have been a leak It was an orchestrated leak that some of the American officials, government officials, was calling Israel's prime minister names, and they leaked that. Said he was a coward because he wouldn't do what they wanted to do. And back in the last war uprising that they had, we stopped shipment of rockets going to Israel till it was over. Now we see this on the news and we say, well, things are just changing. But what are we really seeing? We're really seeing the fulfillment of Zechariah 14:1. It starts out like this. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is the heart of Israel, folks. I will gather all nations against Jerusalem. The battle of the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city should go into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. He said, I'm going to gather all nations. Never happened before. It's never been a time when all nations were gathered. And I got into a discussion one time, not many years ago, with a guy back there, and he told me, he said, America will never abandon Israel. I said, yes, she will. Because that says all nations. And you know what? She has. And this was the leaking out of this information, was to show Israel's enemies that America would no longer back her in a war. Because we really begin to feel like we'd be better off if Israel wasn't there. We've got the mindset that the nations, the Arab nations, the Islamic nations that hate us would really love us if Israel wasn't there. It's ignorance gone to seed. And when we begin to let her enemies know that America will no longer back her, they're coming. They're coming. Watch for it. They're coming against Israel as a whole. Last week, who was it? Sweden, that recognized the Palestinian state. European Union is beginning to talk like we're going to recognize the Palestinian state. In other words, then Israel will be the outlaw because the world will have decided what to do with Jerusalem. Let me tell you what they're going to decide. Half of it belongs to the Arabs. Yes. That's what Zechariah said. What you're seeing is the fulfillment of what Zechariah said thousands of years ago. We see it on the news. Well, policy is changing. No, yeah, it's changing. Just like God said it would change, folks. You better know what you're seeing when you see it. It was leaked intentionally. We see Russia. And you just about regularly see it on the news here lately. They are buzzing the airspace of the NATO countries. They have had nuclear submarines on the very borders of our international waters. They have invaded the Ukraine and took part of it back, seeing how far they can go. And they smell our weakness. You know, when the Soviet Union fell a few years ago, and everybody said, well, the Cold War is over. And you might remember back during the last election, when Mitt Romney was talking on one of the debates, he said something about Russia. We were cutting back our military. Russia was building theirs. We needed to be aware. And he was mocked. They said, well, hey, he's still stuck back there in the Cold War. The Cold War is over. Matter of fact, our president said that. Mitt Romney's stuck back there. The Cold War has been over for years. But it ain't over now. We see the bear awaken. And I told people back when they were saying, well, we don't have to worry about Russia anymore. I said, the bear's in hibernation. But he ain't dead. He's coming back. And how did I know he was coming back? Not because I was smart, but because Ezekiel 38 declared that in the end times he would join with the Arab army to demolish Israel. So regardless of what it looked like, So you see, by looking at the situation, how it has been the last several years, you say, well, okay, we're at peace with Russia. But now you can see what you're looking at is what God said would happen. Go read Ezekiel 38 and go back and study those nations. Now they had different names then, but they're nations today. Those nations that would come against Israel in the end time to destroy her. What you're seeing is the very foundation of prophecy being laid, folks. We're seeing what God said would happen begin to happen. You turn on the news today, and well, especially in California, you see the extreme droughts. You see, in other places, you'll see flooding, bad flooding. You'll see terrible storms. You see where some of the experts are warning that if something doesn't happen, you know, that if we don't change some things, we're going to get to where we can't produce enough food for the world. We see the world on fire. Everywhere you look, there's somebody fighting. And the news will say, we told you it was global warming. We told you this was going to happen. We told you the temperatures rising was going to even affect people and make them angry. We told you global warming was going to cause droughts and floods. We told you that global warming would even produce diseases. We told you. The world said, yeah, that's it. But what did Jesus tell you? Jesus said at the end time that there would be pestilences, diseases without cure springing up. Jesus said at the end time that there would be violent storms. Earthquakes begin to multiply. See, you look at it in the natural eyes and you see the effect of global warming. But you better see it as Jesus called it. Because whether you see it or not, it's happening. Just like he said. It's happening. It's not global warming. It's global judgment gathering, folks. It's global judgment gathering. They're all here. It's hard to deny that the things that Jesus said was coming, it's not here. You can see them. But they are being not denied because people don't recognize what it is they're looking at. You better know what you see. You better know. Jesus said these were the beginning of sorrows or the beginning of birth pains. If you want to put it in the natural language, he said sorrows, but if you look that up, it means beginning of birth pains. And birth pains, folks, starts out small and keeps multiplying until the baby is born. Well, the world's birth pains are going to keep on multiplying, folks, until judgment is falling and the church is gone. What you are seeing, what you're really seeing on the news, and the same news that will call you an idiot for believing God is showing you that what God said is happening. But they're looking at it with different eyes. They're seeing and not seeing, hearing and not hearing. I saw just this week where I believe it was Marine. He took issue with a school here in America. I forgot what state it was in. But they were requiring their students to write a paper on the virtues of Islam and Muhammad. And when he protested, they banned him from the school. They said, we're not teaching religion, we're teaching historical facts. Have you known a school anywhere that teaches historical facts about Jesus? What this is to try and, okay, here's the reality, Muhammad. Here's the reality, Islam. We We are embracing a strange God, folks. God warned us about that. He warned us about that. See, Muhammad left the world soaked with the blood of those that wouldn't follow him. That's the truth. Go back and read the history before they changed that. He left the world soaked with the blood of those who wouldn't follow him. Jesus left the world soaked with his own blood. So we could live. So we could live. And I'm not talking about existing. I'm talking about so we could live. But it's happening. It's happening. Why is all of this? Well, you know, we're getting smarter now. But what did the Bible declare about the end time generation? It declared this. Paul, writing to the Romans, he said, professing themselves to be wise, they become fools, and change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like the corruptible man, and the birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. In other words, they said they ain't no God. Nature's God. We all just started coming up from a tiny one-cell amoeba, and your ancestors are monkeys. I told somebody, some of my ancestors might have hung by the neck, but none of them ever hung by the tail, I'll guarantee it. I'm pretty sure some of mine did hang by the neck, but they never had a tail because they were created man. Man. The Bible said they would profess themselves wise and become fools. What do I see? I see God giving them up to uncleanness, to the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. Doing their own thing to their own destruction. To their own destruction. And see, the devil will tell you, well, what you're doing is not hurting anybody but you. Yet it's affecting your children, and it'll affect your grandchildren and those that was after you, because they will look and see what you did, and that will be in their mind. And you know, people will say, well, you know, kids see all of this, they won't ever want to do that. You got somebody that's a alcoholic. Well, the kids won't ever be an alcoholic. Statistics says most of them will. That's what they're used to. So what you're doing is affecting others. You might not think it is, but it's affecting them, because we are spiritual beings, and what we do will paint a picture in the spirit of those that's looking after you, at you. And they will begin to think the way your action said you don't. Oh, it's quiet. It's quiet. But as we look at the church, the one we spoke of a while ago, there is a world church, and the Bible also declares that there will be a church going out and a church staying. There will be a church that will go along with everything that the world's going along with, and then there will be a church leaving. And you know, the critics and the skeptics will tell you that Christianity is fading, that soon there will be no Christianity. It will just be kind of a social thing, and we see that. But there will always going to be Christianity, folks, because we're looking at what the world church is doing, but God's looking right at the church that is blood-bought. That is blood-bought, that sees what he says. I'm looking at a church that's going out without spot, wrinkle, or blemish. I'm looking at kings and priests in training. I'm looking at a people that one day will hear a trumpet sound, and they'll hear it. And when God says, come up here, the body will be changed and they'll go. He said, oh, I don't believe there's going to be a rapture. Well, stay here. You can still be believing there ain't going to be one when the church is gone. I didn't believe that. See, it ain't what we believe, it's what God said. And He will bring it to pass, and is bringing it to pass. See, they are. If you go back and read the Bible, Elijah, the prophet of God, and he's one of the prophets that's coming back in the end time to teach the world that's in judgment again. But he was taken out, he was raptured, folks, taken out alive. And when Elisha, the one that was going to take his place, came along and began to tell them that Elijah had went up alive, the children of Baal came out and said, "You go up. Prove to us something. You go up, you old bald-headed prophet. You go up." They didn't believe it either. But it didn't work out well for them. Go read the story. See, the bears came out and ate him, and they became bear food. So I'm telling you this morning, and you know, in the natural, you may not see it at all. But when the church is gone, remember this. I told you it was leaving. It's leaving. When's it leaving? Right on time. Amen. Right on time. And sometime when you got time, if you want to see what God says, I'll sit down and show you in the Word. The timing. Am I saying it's going to be next week? I sure ain't. A lot of folks think that by saying, "Oh, you can't tell God when to come." I don't have to. He's already told us. He's already told us. And we're in that last timing. This is the last generation coming. Jesus said that. I didn't. Jesus said that. We talked not long back on the series on God's end time. Get and look at some of that things and see if it's so. See if you can see it. And if you can't, get in this book and ask God to let you see the truth. Not the truth as Jerry Lackey says, but the truth as he says. Because there's nothing going to be more important to you than that. See, the devil wants to make you believe that we're just going to work everything out. Man's going to work it out. We're going to work it out. Our defense minister said the other day that we were just moving into a new world order. That's what all this chaos was, just moving us into a new world order. He's right. There's a new world order coming. But it's not going to be like man thinks it's going to be. It's not going to be a utopia. It's going to be hell on earth. Can't happen in America. It's already happening. Our training, if you work there, they're training you how to be Muslim sensitive. You've got to go along with their sensitivity to work there. You ever saw a story where you had to go along with Christian sensitivity to work there? Sensitivity. I can't say the word, but you know what I'm saying. You know, stores can't even sell Christmas trees. You realize that? They got to have holiday trees. But now we're training people to be Muslim sensitive. We're giving up the God of truth for a made-up God. That's not religiously correct, and that's on a CD back there. But if they arrest you, pastor, just preach on anyway. It's the truth. It's the truth. We better see what God said is coming. We better recognize what we're looking at. Because there's going to be, again, let me say this again. There's going to be a church leaving and a church staying. And whether you think you are or not, you're making your choice today. One way or the other. You're making your choice. And I'm not saying this to scare anybody. I'm saying this to tell you the dangers of not seeing what's happening around you. Biblically. Biblically. But see, when a man's mind is blinded, it takes the Spirit of God to break through with the truth. And so many minds have been blinded. Absolutely blinded. We hope you got something out of this morning. You know where you're at with the Lord. And can I say this? You don't have to believe in God at all. You don't. You can make that choice. But you make him no less God. I heard John Hagee say one time, if a thief breaks into your house with a gun, you say, I ain't worried about you. I don't believe in guns. He said, still won't keep him from shooting you. See, we don't have to believe what God said, but it's still going to happen. And it is happening. So don't let the devil get you so smart that you think we've got this thing figured out, because we don't. I don't have it figured out. God already figured it out. And he has the power to bring it to pass, and he's bringing it to pass, even as we speak. And you and I are lining up, even as we speak, to be taken or left. Today the choice is ours, one day it won't be.